The phone rang at 11:30 at night, jolting me awake. My parents' number flashed on the screen. My stomach instantly knotted. Late-night calls meant only one thing: Jake needed money again. I answered with dread in my voice. "Mom, what's wrong?" Her voice was frantic. "Myrtle, Jake's landlord is threatening eviction. We need $5,000 by tomorrow morning." "Not we need, Jake needs." I took a deep breath. "Mom, I've given him over $75,000 in the past 3 years. I can't do this anymore." Her tone changed instantly. "How dare you be so stingy? After everything we've done for you?" My father grabbed the phone. "You selfish, ungrateful daughter. If you don't help your brother, don't consider yourself part of this family anymore." I hung up my hands, shaking uncontrollably, tears streaming down my face. I opened my banking app and stared at the consequences of my generosity retirement account, nearly drained credit cards maxed out. Something inside me finally broke. This time, I wouldn't back down. I never thought my family would turn on me like this. Growing up in our modest home in Pennsylvania, Jake and I had a typical sibling relationship. I'm 32 now, 4 years older than Jake. And despite our parents' obvious favoritism toward him, we were close as kids. We built blanket forts, rode bikes through the neighborhood, and defended each other at school. But even then, there were signs of the imbalance. When I earned straight, as my parents would nod and say, "That's expected." When Jake managed to get B's, they celebrated with ice cream and presents. I worked hard through high school, earning a partial scholarship to college, and still graduated with loans I paid off myself. Meanwhile, Jake dropped out of community college after 2 semesters, with my parents making excuses about the system not supporting his learning style. I pushed forward anyway, becoming a physical therapist with my own private practice. I built everything from nothing, working double shifts during my residency, living with 4 roommates to save money, and eating ramen more often than I care to remember. 3 years ago, when Jake called me in tears, saying he'd lost both his apartment and his job as a sales associate at an electronics store, I didn't hesitate to help. He claimed his roommate had skipped town, leaving him responsible for the entire rent, and that his boss had unfairly fired him after he missed a few shifts because of transportation issues. My parents invited me to dinner to discuss the Jake situation, as my mother called it. We sat around their dining table, the same one from my childhood, with the familiar scratch near my old spot from when I accidentally dragged a fork across it at age 9 and was grounded for a week. "Myrtle, your brother is going through a rough patch, my father," Frank said, as he scooped mashed potatoes onto his plate. "He just needs a little help getting back on his feet." My mother, Linda, reached across and squeezed my hand. "We would help him ourselves. But, you know, your father's pension only covers our basic expenses. And my part-time job barely pays for groceries." Jake sat across from me, eyes downcast, pushing food around his plate. "I'll pay you back, Myrtle. I promise. I just need 3 months tops to find a good job and get a new place." I felt a surge of pride that I was in a position to help my brother. Maybe this would be the moment I'd finally earn my parents' approval. Maybe Jake would use this opportunity to turn his life around. "Of course I'll help," I said, smiling at Jake. "Family supports family. I can cover your rent for a few months and help with expenses until you're back on your feet." The relief on everyone's faces made me feel like a hero. My mother hugged me, my father patted my shoulder approvingly, and Jake's eyes welled up with grateful tears. After dinner, I helped my mother clean up in the kitchen, while my father and Jake watched TV in the living room. As I was putting away the last of the dishes, I overheard their conversation drifting in from the other room. "Don't stress too much about finding work right away," my father was saying in a low voice. "Your sister makes plenty of money with that fancy practice of hers." "Yeah," Jake replied. "And honestly, she owes the family after being so focused on her career all these years while we struggled." My mother, noticing my frozen posture by the sink, quickly turned up the faucet to drown out their voices. But it was too late. I'd heard enough to feel a cold chill run down my spine. I told myself they didn't really mean it that way. It had to be a misunderstanding. I pushed the conversation from my mind, convinced that with my help, Jake would quickly become self-sufficient, and we'd look back on this as a brief, rough patch in his life. I couldn't have been more wrong. The first few months of supporting Jake seemed reasonable enough. I paid his rent directly to his new landlord, a modest one-bedroom apartment that cost $1,200 monthly. I added him to my phone plan, paid his car insurance and loan payment, and gave him a weekly stipend for groceries and gas. It was stretching my budget, but I told myself it was temporary. 6 weeks into our arrangement, Jake called asking for extra money to buy professional clothes for job interviews. I transferred $500 without question. 2 weeks later, he needed $300 for an unexpected car repair. Again, I sent the money immediately, happy he was actively looking for work. But then I started noticing troubling patterns on social media. While claiming to be diligently job hunting, Jake's Instagram showed him at a baseball game with expensive seats behind home plate. When I mentioned it casually on our next call, he became defensive. Am I not allowed to have any fun while I'm unemployed? My friend had an extra ticket. Should I just sit at home staring at the wall between job applications? I backed off, not wanting to seem controlling. But the posts continued. Jake, at upscale restaurants, sporting new sneakers that I recognized as a $300 brand, even a weekend trip to Nashville with friends, all while telling me he was too broke to buy groceries that week. 3 months into supporting him, I gently asked about his job search during our weekly Sunday phone call. It's so frustrating, he sighed. I've applied to like 50 places. The economy sucks right now. What kinds of positions are you looking for? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Management mostly, he replied. With my experience, I shouldn't have to start at the bottom again. I paused, confused. Jake's work history consisted of the electronics store job and a few months at a coffee shop the year before. Neither had been management positions. Jake, you might need to cast a wider net, I suggested carefully. Maybe consider some entry-level positions just to get steady income while you look for something more in line with your goals. The line went quiet for a moment. Wow. Thanks for the vote of confidence, sis. Glad to know you think so highly of me. That's not what I meant. I backpedaled, already feeling guilty. I just want to help you get on your feet faster. If you want to help, he snapped, you can stop questioning my every move. I'm doing the best I can, and I don't need my big sister micromanaging me on top of everything else. That evening, I called my parents, hoping they might encourage Jake to be more practical in his job search. Their response left me speechless. Myrtle, if you're going to help your brother, you shouldn't attach all these strings, my mother said. Jake is very depressed about his situation, and your criticism isn't helping. I'm not criticizing him, I protested. I'm just concerned that he's not being realistic about his job prospects. My father's voice replaced my mother's on the phone. Your brother doesn't need you telling him to flip burgers somewhere. He's got ambition, unlike some people who just take the safe route in life. That stung. My safe route had required years of education, grueling clinical rotations, and building a business from scratch. But rather than argue, I changed the subject. As 6 months of supporting Jake approached, my financial cushion was noticeably thinner. I'd stopped my automatic transfers to my retirement account and had begun to carry balances on my credit cards for the first time in years. The anxiety kept me up at night, calculating and recalculating how long I could sustain this arrangement. Then came the day that opened my eyes to what was really happening. Amber, a mutual friend from high school who worked at a local marketing firm, called me out of the blue. Hey, Myrtle. I just wanted to give you a heads up about Jake, she said hesitantly. He interviewed at our company last month for an entry-level position, and he did really well. We offered him the job, but he turned it down. I sat down stunned. He never mentioned interviewing at your company. That's not all, Amber continued. My boyfriend works at Peterson Insurance, and he said they offered Jake a customer service position 2 weeks before that, and he turned them down too. I thought maybe you should know. I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. That evening, I drove to Jake's apartment unannounced, something I'd never done before. He answered the door in new designer sweatpants, wireless earbuds in his ears, looking surprised to see me. "We need to talk," I said, walking past him into the apartment I was paying for. On his coffee table sat a new gaming system that hadn't been there when I'd helped him move in. "Why did you turn down jobs at Amber's marketing firm and at Peterson Insurance?" I asked without preamble. I expected denial, excuses, or outrage. What I got was far worse. Jake smirked and shrugged. Those jobs were jokes. Answering phones at an insurance company. Fetching coffee for marketing executives. "Please." He flopped onto the couch. "Mom and Dad agree I shouldn't settle for just any job. I need something that's going to launch my career properly." "Mom and Dad know about these offers?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Of course. We talk about my job search all the time. They're really supportive, unlike some people." He gave me a pointed look. "They understand that quality is more important than speed when it comes to finding the right position." In that moment, I realized they'd all been coordinating behind my back. While I worked extra hours to support Jake, they were actively encouraging him to remain unemployed at my expense. I left his apartment in a daze, fighting back tears. The betrayal cut deep, but I still couldn't bring myself to cut him off. He was my brother, and despite everything, I loved him. I told myself I just needed to be more firm about expectations. Set a timeline. Make a concrete plan for his independence. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was being played for a fool by the people who should have loved me most. As Jake's temporary support extended into its second year, the financial pressure mounted steadily. My business was doing well, but not well enough to support two adult lifestyles indefinitely. I began picking up extra clients, sometimes working through lunch, and adding Saturday appointments to my schedule. My assistant, Tara, noticed my exhaustion. "Myrtle, you've worked 14 days straight," she said one evening, as I finished charting after my last patient. "This isn't sustainable." I rubbed my eyes, fighting off a headache. "I know, it's just a rough patch. You've been saying that for months. Is everything okay with your finances?" "The practice seems busier than ever." I nearly told her everything then about Jake. My parents, the money hemorrhaging from my accounts. Instead, I forced a smile. Just saving for some big future plans. The truth was too embarrassing to share. How could I admit that a successful professional who helped others recover from injuries, couldn't heal the toxic dynamic in my own family? Meanwhile, Jake's financial demands grew increasingly extravagant. What started as rent and basic expenses expanded to include a new laptop for job applications, dental work, not covered by the insurance. I was also paying for, and even a weekend professional development conference in San Diego that he claimed would open doors. Each time I expressed hesitation, Jake had a ready response. "If you're not going to support me properly, just say so," he'd snap. "I can always move back in with Mom and Dad, but they're barely getting by as it is." The mere thought of our elderly parents trying to accommodate Jake in their small home was enough to make me relent. So I paid and paid and paid some more. My social life withered away entirely. I canceled plans with friends so often that the invitations eventually stopped coming. Dating became impossible. Who had the time or energy? The one man I had started seeing, a kind chiropractor named Adam, gradually faded from my life after I canceled 4 dates in a row. "I get that you're busy," he said during our last phone call, "but it feels like something else is going on that you're not sharing. I can't be in a relationship with someone who's never actually present." He was right, of course. I was never fully present anywhere anymore. Even with patience, I caught my mind wandering to calculations of how many more sessions I'd need to cover Jake's car repair or upcoming insurance premium. When I did raise concerns with my parents, they had an arsenal of emotional weapons to deploy. "Remember when you missed Jake's high school graduation because of your college exams?" my mother said during one such conversation. "He was so hurt, but he never complained. He's always been so understanding of your priorities." And now when he needs you, you're counting pennies, my father added. Is that the kind of sister you want to be? They conveniently forgot that I'd missed the ceremony but attended the family celebration afterward, bringing Jake an expensive watch I'd saved for months to buy, or that my priorities were exams I couldn't reschedule without failing my courses. As my savings dwindled and credit card debt accumulated, my anxiety spiraled. I developed insomnia, often lying awake until 3 or 4 in the morning, then dragging myself to work on 4 hours of sleep. I had panic attacks in the shower in my car, sometimes even in the brief moments between patient appointments. The strong, confident woman I'd worked so hard to become was disappearing, replaced by someone perpetually exhausted and on edge. Then came Thanksgiving of that second year. I'd been looking forward to the holiday as a rare day off, a chance to relax and enjoy a meal I didn't have to cook alone in my apartment. My mother insisted I bring the wine desserts and a vegetable side dish, which cost nearly $200 for our small gathering of 4. I didn't complain, happy to contribute. The dinner conversation revolved around my parents' upcoming 50th wedding anniversary. We've been saving for a cruise, my mother mentioned, passing the mashed potatoes. Nothing extravagant, just a week in the Caribbean. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely pleased they would have this experience. Which cruise line are you considering? They exchanged a quick glance before my father answered. Princess. They had a good deal for a balcony cabin. I nearly choked on my wine. A balcony cabin on Princess for a week would cost at least $4,000, possibly more. On their fixed income, such a luxury seemed impossible. That's quite a splurge, I commented carefully. You must have been saving for a long time. My mother beamed at Jake. Your brother helped us book it. He's so thoughtful. Jake studied his plate, unusually quiet. After dinner, I offered to help clean up, following my mother into the kitchen with a stack of plates. As she rinsed them, I opened the drawer where she kept bills and household papers, looking for extra napkins. A Princess Cruises envelope sat on top of the stack. I shouldn't have looked, but something compelled me to flip it open. Inside was a booking confirmation. The cruise had been paid in full to the tune of $6,700. The payment method listed was a credit card in Jake's name. My head spinning, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Once alone, I pulled out my phone and checked my online banking app. Sure enough, I'd transferred $7,000 to Jake 3 weeks earlier when he claimed to need emergency dental surgery. When I returned to the kitchen, my mother was humming as she loaded the dishwasher. Mom, I said quietly, did Jake pay for your cruise? She froze momentarily, then continued arranging plates. Why would you ask such a thing? I saw the confirmation. The cruise cost nearly $7,000 paid for on Jake's credit card. Money that I gave him for dental work he supposedly needed. She turned to face me, her expression suddenly hard. You gave that money to your brother to use as he saw fit. What he chooses to do with it is his business. But that was money for his medical needs, not for luxury vacations for you and Dad. Oh, Myrtle. She shook her head as if I were a disappointing child. You've always been so rigid about money. So controlling. Family finances should flow to where they're needed most. Flow, I repeated, stunned by her characterization. Mom, I've given Jake over $50,000 at this point. Money I worked for. Money I should be saving for my own future. And we raised you for 18 years, she countered. Fed you, clothed you, paid for braces and school supplies and everything else. Did we ever send you a bill for that? I stared at her, speechless. In her mind, my financial support wasn't generosity, but obligation, repayment of a debt she believed I owed. Later, after a tense remainder of the evening, I discovered more shocking evidence. While looking for my code in Jake's room, I found credit card statements showing regular payments to our parents' utility companies, a $4,000 contribution to their roof repair earlier that year, and monthly transfers, labeled Mom's spending money. Jake wasn't just living off my support. He was playing the hero by redistributing my money to our parents, while taking full credit for the generosity. And they all knew exactly what was happening. On the drive home that night, I cried so hard I had to pull over twice because I couldn't see the road. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was a complete devaluation of me as a person. To them, I wasn't a daughter or sister to be loved and respected. I was an ATM, a resource to be drained for their benefit. Yet even then, I couldn't bring myself to cut them off entirely. They were my family, the only one I had. Surely there was some way to fix this, to make them understand how deeply they were hurting me. I just had to find the right approach, the perfect words, to make them see me as a person again, not just a provider. I had no idea how much worse things would get before I finally found my voice. By the third year of supporting Jake, my financial situation had become dire. My once healthy savings account was depleted. My credit score had dropped nearly 100 points due to high credit card utilization. I'd even taken a loan against my retirement account, something I'd sworn I'd never do. The physical toll was equally severe. Chronic stress had led to weight loss, constant headaches, and stomach problems. My doctor warned me about my elevated blood pressure and recommended therapy for anxiety. But therapy cost money. Money that was already allocated to Jake's expenses. The breaking point came in April during a routine dental checkup. My dentist found 2 cavities that needed immediate attention and a cracked molar that required a crown. "You've been grinding your teeth," Dr. Patterson said, showing me the x-rays. "Probably stress-related. We need to address this before it causes more damage." The estimated cost for all the work was $2,800. My insurance would cover only $600. As I stared at the treatment plan, I realized with crushing clarity that I couldn't afford necessary dental care for myself while still funding Jake's lifestyle. That same evening, Jake called asking for money to repair his car's transmission. $3,000 on top of the regular monthly support. When I hesitated, he immediately became hostile. "Fine, I guess I'll just lose my job," he snapped. "I finally find decent work and you can't even help me get there. Thanks a lot, Myrtle." The job he referred to was a part-time position at a golf pro shop that barely covered his coffee habit, secured only after I'd threatened to reduce his stipend. It was the first employment he'd maintained for more than 2 weeks in the entire 3 years I'd been supporting him. "Jake, I need dental work myself that I can't afford," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've given you over $60,000 at this point. I'm drowning in debt because of it. So what are you saying, that your teeth are more important than my entire livelihood? Without a car, I'll lose my job." And then what? The conversation ended with me agreeing to think about it, which Jake took as an eventual yes. It always had been before. The next day, I scheduled a consultation with a financial advisor, something I should have done years earlier. Sandra Mendelson reviewed my financial statements with growing concern. "Myrtle, this is financial abuse," she said bluntly, setting down the papers. "You're being systematically drained by your family." "Abuse seems like a strong word," I protested weakly. "They're not forcing me." "Emotional coercion is force," she countered. "And from what you've told me, they're experts at it. This isn't sustainable. At this rate, you'll be filing for bankruptcy within 18 months. She helped me create a realistic budget that included gradually tapering off support for Jake while rebuilding my own financial security. The plan involved a difficult conversation with my family, setting clear boundaries and a timeline for Jake's self-sufficiency. I spent a week rehearsing what I would say, seeking the perfect words that would make them understand without triggering their defensiveness. Finally, I invited them all to dinner at my apartment, hoping the neutral territory would help. The meeting was a disaster from the start. Jake arrived 40 minutes late, reeking of alcohol. My parents seemed disinterested, checking their phones and making minimal eye contact as I carefully explained my financial situation. "So I've worked out a 6-month transition plan," I concluded, after laying out the unsustainable nature of our arrangement. "I'll continue paying your rent, Jake, but the other expenses will need to be phased out gradually as you increase your hours at work." The silence that followed was broken by Jake's harsh laugh. 6 months. Are you kidding me? In this economy? My mother's face had hardened into a mask of disapproval. "Myrtle, we didn't raise you to abandon family when they need you." "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said, fighting to keep my voice level. "I'm drowning. I can't even afford my own dental work." So go to a cheaper dentist, my father scoffed. There are always options if you're not too proud to look for them. The irony of him accusing me of pride was staggering. Dad, I've depleted my savings and taken on debt to help Jake. This isn't about pride. It's about survival. Jake stood up, knocking his chair backward. This is bullshit. You make plenty of money. You're just being selfish. Selfish. I repeated, my voice rising despite my best intentions. I've given you over $60,000. And I'm your brother, he shouted. What else is family for, if not to help each other? But I guess your precious money means more to you than we do. My mother began to cry, not the quiet tears of genuine hurt, but the dramatic sobs she'd used throughout my childhood to end discussions that weren't going her way. After all we've sacrificed for you, she wailed. Now when we finally need something in return, you're abandoning us. My father put his arm around her and glared at me. If you go through with this plan of yours, don't expect to remain in the will. We won't support someone who turns her back on family. They left shortly after Jake, slamming the door so hard that my framed diploma fell off the wall and cracked. I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the half-eaten dinner and shattered glass, a perfect metaphor for my family relationships. 2 days later, I received a call from Zoe, a former college classmate who had remained a casual friend. Her husband worked at a property management company. Myrtle, I'm not sure if I should be telling you this, she began hesitantly. But Tyler processed some paperwork yesterday that had Jake's name on it, and I thought it seemed odd given what you've mentioned about his financial situation. My stomach clenched. What kind of paperwork? A rental agreement for a small investment property. A duplex on Cedar Street. Tyler said the down payment was substantial. Nearly $30,000. The room seemed to tilt around me. That's impossible. Jake doesn't have that kind of money. That's what seemed weird. The property is actually in your parents' names, but Jake was handling all the paperwork. Tyler only mentioned it because he remembered me talking about your brother's financial troubles. After hanging up, I drove to the county records office in a daze. It took only minutes to confirm Zoe's information. My parents had indeed purchased a small duplex 2 months earlier with a down payment of $28,000. The very same month Jake had claimed to need emergency gallbladder surgery, a procedure I'd paid for without question. There had been no surgery. The money had gone toward an investment property deliberately placed in my parents' names to hide it from me. They had planned and executed this deception together, all while continuing to drain me financially and emotionally. This wasn't just taking advantage of my generosity. This was calculated exploitation. I pulled over on the drive home, overcome with a wave of nausea so intense I thought I might vomit. 3 years of sacrifice, of putting their needs above my own, of believing that family meant supporting each other through difficult times. And all along they had been laughing at me, using me, stealing from me. The realization broke something fundamental in my understanding of family love and trust. If the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally could betray me so completely, who could I ever trust again? I spent that night alternating between tears of grief and rage. By morning, something had shifted inside me. The fear of confrontation, the desperate need for their approval, the guilt they had so expertly weaponized against me, all of it had burned away in the fire of their betrayal. For the first time in 3 years, I saw the situation with perfect clarity. And I knew exactly what I needed to do next. 2 weeks after discovering the investment property, I was ready to confront my family with the full truth. During that time, I'd prepared, methodically consulting both a therapist specialized in family trauma and my financial advisor. With their guidance, I'd assembled irrefutable evidence of the financial abuse I'd endured. I created a spreadsheet documenting every dollar given to Jake over the past 3 years, totaling $78,436. I gathered credit card statements showing Jake's expenditures, vacations, electronics, expensive restaurants, designer clothes. I printed the property records for the duplex. I even compiled screenshots of Jake's social media posts flaunting his lifestyle while I worked 60-hour weeks to support him. Rather than inviting them to my territory again, I asked to meet at my parents' house on a Sunday afternoon. I wanted them to feel comfortable, unguarded. My therapist had warned me that cornered narcissists become dangerous, and I needed to maintain as much control over the situation as possible. They seemed surprised by my request, but agreed readily, perhaps assuming I'd had a change of heart about reducing Jake's support. When I arrived, they were waiting in the living room, my mother offering cookies as if this were a casual visit. "Before we start," I said, declining refreshments, "I want to make it clear that I'm recording this conversation for my records." I placed my phone visibly on the coffee table, the recording app already running. "I have some information to share, and I'd appreciate it if you'd hear me out completely before responding." My father frowned. "Recording. What's this about Myrtle?" "It's about transparency," I replied, opening my laptop. "Something that's been missing from our relationship for a long time." I began with the spreadsheet screen sharing to their TV via Chromecast so they could see the detailed accounting of my financial support. Line by line, month by month, the evidence of their exploitation displayed in stark black and white. As you can see, I continued, my voice steady. "Despite my racing heart, I've provided Jake with nearly $80,000 since he lost his job 3 years ago. Money that was supposed to be temporary support until he got back on his feet." I clicked to the next document, a comparison of Jake's actual expenses versus his claimed needs. Jake told me he needed $4,000 for emergency gallbladder surgery in February. I looked directly at my brother, whose face had paled considerably. "Strangely, your medical insurance shows no record of this procedure. However, county records show Mom and Dad made a down payment on a rental property that same month. A property worth exactly $4,000 more than what I gave you for your supposed surgery." My mother shifted uncomfortably. My father's face flushed, dark red. "Furthermore," I continued while claiming financial hardship, "Jake has taken 3 vacations in the past year alone. He's purchased a new gaming system, designer clothes, and even paid for your anniversary cruise." I turned to my parents. "Money that I earned. Money that I gave him for essentials and medical needs. Money that has left me in debt, while you all enjoyed the benefits." "Now wait just a minute," my father blustered, starting to rise from his chair. "No," I said firmly. "I've waited 3 years. It's your turn to listen." I showed them my depleted savings accounts, my maxed-out credit cards, the loan against my retirement fund. I showed them my own untreated dental issues. I showed them the text messages and emails where they'd called me selfish, stingy, and ungrateful for questioning Jake's endless needs. "This stops today," I said, closing my laptop. "I will not give Jake another dollar. I will not listen to another guilt trip. I will not allow this abuse to continue." The silence that followed should have been heavy with shame, regret, or at least recognition of the harm they'd caused. Instead, my family's reactions revealed the true depth of their entitlement. Jake spoke first, his initial shock giving way to sneering defiance. "So you made a PowerPoint about how much you hate your family. Congratulations. Want a medal for being such a martyr." "This isn't about hate," I responded calmly. "It's about facts. Money that I earned has been systematically diverted to purposes I never agreed to." My mother's face contorted with rage. "How dare you speak to us this way? After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me, Mom? Since I turned 18, what support have you provided? Emotional, financial, professional." "We raised you," she shrieked. "Fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head." "That's called parenting," I replied. "It's the basic legal obligation of having children. It doesn't entitle you to drain my bank accounts for the rest of my life." My father stood, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You've always been selfish, Myrtle. Always thinking you're better than us, with your fancy degree and your private practice. The truth is you're worthless except for your money. At least Jake appreciates family. At least he understands loyalty." His words struck like physical blows, but I refused to show how deeply they hurt. "Loyalty goes both ways, Dad. And appreciation is shown through respect, not exploitation." My mother was openly sobbing now. "I always knew you were selfish. From the time you were little. Always wanting recognition. Always needing praise for every little thing you did." Jake, emboldened by our parents' attacks, delivered the cruelest blow. "You really thought I was going to pay you back?" He laughed, a cold, mocking sound. God, you're pathetic. We've been living off your guilt and desperation for approval for years. And you just kept paying thinking someday we'd finally love you enough. The room seemed to freeze around me. In that moment of naked honesty, Jake had confirmed my worst fears. They had never seen my support as generosity, but as a weakness to exploit. They had never intended for the situation to be temporary. They had been laughing at me all along, just as the devastating reality of their betrayal threatened to overwhelm me. The front door opened. My cousin Allison walked in, stopping short at the scene before her. "Sorry, Aunt Linda, you said to just come in when I arrived." Her voice trailed off as she sensed the tension. My father attempted damage control. "Allison, this isn't a good time. Your cousin is having some kind of breakdown." "I'm not having a breakdown," I said, gathering my things. "I'm finally standing up for myself." Allison looked confused. "What's going on?" "Myrtle's decided she's too good for her family," my mother spat. "After all, we've done all the sacrifices we've made, she's abandoning us." Allison's gaze shifted between us, her expression unreadable. Then she said something that changed everything. "Sacrifices, Aunt Linda. You told everyone at Thanksgiving that Myrtle barely helps Jake at all. You said she makes 6 figures but only gives him a few $100s now and then." The room went silent. I stared at Allison, then at my family. "What?" Allison continued, oblivious to the bomb she'd just dropped. "Uncle Frank was complaining to my dad last month about how stingy Myrtle is, how she makes Jake jump through hoops for any help. He said if she weren't so selfish, Jake could have finished his degree by now." I felt as if I'd been doused with ice water. Not only had they been exploiting me financially, but they'd been actively smearing my reputation within the extended family, painting me as the villain in their fictional narrative. "That's why everyone was so cold to you at Christmas," Allison added, understanding dawning on her face as she looked at my laptop, still displaying the financial records. "But that's not true at all, is it? You've been supporting him completely." My parents and Jake exchanged panicked glances, their united front cracking under the exposure of their lies. "You've been telling the family I'm selfish and stingy," I whispered, the final betrayal almost too much to bear. "While taking $78,000 from me." No one answered. They didn't need to. The truth was written plainly across their guilty faces. I gathered my things with shaking hands, holding on to my composure by the thinnest thread. "I'm done," I said simply. "Don't call me for money. Don't contact me at all." As I walked toward the door, my father made one last attempt to regain control. "If you walk out that door, don't expect to be welcomed back. You're choosing money over family." I paused, turning to face them one last time. "No, Dad. I'm choosing self-respect over abuse. There's a difference." With Allison following close behind, I walked out of my parents' house, closing the door on 20 years of manipulation and emotional blackmail. In the driveway, I finally let the tears come, great heaving sobs that bent me double. Allison stood awkwardly beside me, patting my shoulder. "I had no idea, Myrtle. Nobody does. They've been telling everyone you're this cold-hearted success story who forgot where she came from. If I'd known." Her words gave me the strength to straighten up and wipe my eyes. The betrayal went beyond financial exploitation. They had been systematically destroying my reputation within the extended family, ensuring I would have no support system if I ever tried to break free. "It's not your fault," I told her. "But thank you for showing up today. I don't think I could have walked away without hearing what you just told me." As I drove home, a strange sense of lightness began to replace the initial devastation. For 3 years, I'd been carrying the impossible weight of their expectations, demands, and manipulation. For the first time since Jake's initial call for help, I could breathe freely, knowing I was no longer responsible for maintaining their comfortable lifestyle at the expense of my own survival. The road ahead would be difficult. My finances were in shambles. My reputation in the family tarnished, my trust in relationships severely damaged. But as I pulled into my driveway, I realized something fundamental had shifted within me. I was free, and I would never allow myself to be exploited again. The following weeks were among the hardest of my life. After the confrontation, my family launched a multi-pronged attack designed to break my resolve and force me back into the role of provider. First came the desperate texts and calls. Jake sent messages claiming he would be evicted, that he had no food, that his utilities were being shut off. My mother left tearful voicemails about how they might lose their house without my help. My father's approaches alternated between rage and manipulative reminiscing about happy childhood memories. I blocked their numbers after 3 days. Next came the flying monkeys, relatives and family friends dispatched to reason with me. Aunt Carol called to tell me how worried everyone was about my sudden change in personality. My mother's best friend Susan showed up at my office unannounced to lecture me about family obligation. Even my childhood piano teacher somehow got involved, sending a Facebook message expressing disappointment in the woman I'd become. With each attempt, I remained calm and firm. This is a private family matter that's been misrepresented to you. I appreciate your concern, but I need to handle this in my own way. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my life methodically, starting with the legal and financial aspects. I consulted an attorney who specialized in financial abuse cases, bringing my detailed records and the recording from our final confrontation. "You've done an impressive job documenting everything," Attorney Brenda Walsh said, reviewing my files. "While family financial matters can be difficult to litigate, you've established a clear pattern of misrepresentation and fraud." She helped me draft a formal demand letter to Jake outlining the money he had received under false pretenses and establishing a repayment schedule. We sent it via certified mail, not expecting compliance, but creating an official record of the debt. "Think of this as armor," Brenda explained. "They'll likely ignore it, but if they ever try to pursue you legally or damage your professional reputation, you'll have documentation of their actions and your reasonable response." Next, I worked with my financial advisor to create a recovery plan. We consolidated my credit card debt into a lower interest loan, set up an aggressive repayment schedule, and created a budget that would allow me to rebuild my emergency fund within 18 months. I set up fraud alerts on my credit reports and changed all my banking passwords and security questions. I removed Jake as an authorized user on my phone plan and credit card accounts I'd forgotten he still had access to. I even changed the locks on my apartment after discovering my spare key was missing from its hiding place. The most difficult step was addressing the emotional damage. I found a therapist, Dr. Lillian Chen, who specialized in family trauma and codependency. Our first session was revelatory. "What you're experiencing is grief," she explained gently. "Not just for the money lost, but for the family relationship you thought you had." "I feel so stupid," I admitted, tears streaming down my face. "How did I not see what was happening?" "You saw what you wanted to see," she replied. "What most children want to see in their parents. Love, support, appreciation. That doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human." Over the following weeks, Dr. Chen helped me understand the dysfunctional patterns that had governed my family dynamics since childhood. How my parents had positioned Jake as the golden child, and me as the family workhorse. How my desperate need for their approval had made me vulnerable to manipulation. How my success had threatened their narrative, creating resentment rather than pride. "Your parents trained you from childhood to feel responsible for everyone's happiness," she explained. "That's why cutting them off feels so unnatural, even though it's the healthiest choice you've made in years." I joined a support group for victims of family financial abuse, shocked to discover how common my experience was. Hearing others' stories helped normalize my own, reducing the shame that had kept me isolated for so long. Professionally, I threw myself into my practice, extending my hours to accommodate more patients. The work not only helped my financial recovery, but provided a much-needed sense of competence and control. My patients' progress reminded me daily that I was good at something, that I had value beyond what I could provide financially to my family. 3 months after the confrontation, just as I was finding my footing, my family escalated their tactics. My mother began calling my few remaining friends, telling them I was having a mental breakdown and needed intervention. My father contacted distant relatives with elaborate stories about my supposed substance abuse problems. Most disturbingly, Jake and my father showed up at my workplace one afternoon, telling my receptionist they were concerned about my mental state and needed to speak with me urgently. Thankfully, Tara recognized the manipulation tactic and called building security instead of interrupting my session with a patient. Rather than retreating from this escalation, I decided to take control of the narrative. I created a simple, factual document outlining the financial support I had provided to Jake, the discovery of his deception, and my decision to end the exploitation. No emotional language, just dates, amounts, and documented facts. When concerned friends or family members reached out after being contacted by my parents, I responded calmly. I understand they've shared some concerns about me. I'd be happy to clarify the situation. Then I would share the document, allowing the facts to speak for themselves. The strategy worked better than I could have hoped. Not only did it neutralize my family's smear campaign, but it opened honest conversations with extended family members who had been fed a distorted version of reality for years. My cousin Allison became an unexpected ally, corroborating my account and sharing her own observations of my parents' manipulative behaviors. My Aunt Deborah, my father's sister, called me in tears after reading my document. I always wondered how Jake maintained his lifestyle, she confessed. Your father told everyone you were stingy with your money, while Jake struggled. I should have questioned it more. You couldn't have known, I assured her, touched by her support. Well, I know now, she said firmly. And I've told your uncle and cousins the truth. We're on your side, Myrtle. Those words, "were on your side," broke something open in me. For so long, I'd seen myself as completely alone in this battle, abandoned by the people who should have loved me most. The realization that I had supporters, family members who believed me and stood by me was powerfully healing. My therapist helped me recognize this as a crucial step in my recovery. You're building a chosen family, she explained. People who earn their place in your life through respect and reciprocity, not obligation or manipulation. 6 months after cutting ties with my immediate family, I received a cease and desist letter from an attorney they had hired, claiming I was defaming them by sharing private financial information with extended family. I forwarded it to Brenda, who responded with a devastatingly comprehensive letter outlining the documented evidence of their fraud and financial exploitation, along with a counter threat to pursue legal remedies if they continued their harassment. We never heard from their attorney again. As my first year of freedom approached, I found myself in a much stronger position than I could have imagined. My credit card debt was half paid off. My savings account was slowly rebuilding. I'd established meaningful connections with extended family members and rebuilt friendships that had withered during my years of exhaustion and isolation. Most importantly, I'd reclaimed my sense of self-worth. Through therapy and support groups, I'd learned to recognize my own value beyond what I could provide to others. I'd started dating again, cautiously but optimistically, making sure potential partners respected my boundaries from the very beginning. When the anniversary of the confrontation arrived, I expected to feel sadness or regret. Instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not for what my family had done to me, but for the strength I'd found in standing up to them. I was still healing, still learning to trust, still rebuilding financially. But for the first time in years, I was living for myself, rather than to fulfill others' expectations. That night, I wrote in my journal. A year ago, I thought losing my family would destroy me. Instead, it saved me. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to walk away from people who can only see you as a resource to exploit, rather than a person to cherish. As I closed the journal, my phone chimed with a text from Allison, thinking of you today. Proud of how far you've come. Dinner next week. I smiled, typing back. Absolutely. My treat this time. A small gesture, but significant. I was no longer the family ATM dispensing cash without question. I was a woman reclaiming her power. One boundary, one relationship, one day at a time. 1 year and 3 months after I cut financial ties with my family, I stood in the sunshine outside my office building, taking a moment to appreciate how much had changed. My private practice was thriving, with a waitlist of patients and a newly hired second physical therapist to handle the overflow. My credit card debt was completely paid off, 3 months ahead of my financial advisor's projected timeline. I had even started contributing to my retirement account again, rebuilding the future I had nearly sacrificed. The personal changes were even more significant than the financial ones. The constant anxiety that had been my companion for years had faded to occasional flares, rather than a continuous state of being. I slept through the night most evenings. My health had improved dramatically. The stress-induced digestive issues resolved, the tension headaches reduced to rare occurrences. I'd maintained meaningful connections with the supportive members of my extended family, particularly Allison and Aunt Deborah, who had become regular fixtures in my life. More surprisingly, I'd built new friendships through my support group and community volunteer work, creating the chosen family my therapist had promised would come. Even my love life had blossomed. After 6 months of focusing solely on my recovery, I'd cautiously begun dating again. For the past 4 months, I'd been seeing Daniel, a kind and thoughtful engineering professor who understood boundaries and reciprocity in a way that still sometimes surprised me. Just last weekend, he'd cooked dinner for me after I mentioned being tired. A simple act of care that brought me to unexpected tears. "What's wrong?" he'd asked, concerned. "Nothing," I'd replied, wiping my eyes with a smile. "I'm just not used to someone paying attention to my needs without expecting anything in return." He'd looked puzzled, then sad, then determined. "Well, get used to it. That's how relationships are supposed to work." I was still learning that lesson, still unraveling the distorted understanding of love my family had instilled in me. But I was making progress day by day. The sound of my name brought me back to the present moment. "Myrtle, I thought that was you." I turned to find my cousin Trevor, Allison's brother, approaching, with a hesitant smile. We hadn't spoken since the family rupture. He'd been traveling abroad for work during the worst of it, and had maintained a careful neutrality upon his return. "Hey, Trevor." I greeted him, unsure of his intentions. "I've been meaning to call you," he said, shifting uncomfortably. "I'm in town for Grandma's birthday celebration this weekend." My heart clenched. I hadn't been invited to my grandmother's birthday, though I'd sent a card and gift. "That's nice," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I hope she enjoys the day. That's actually why I wanted to talk to you." Trevor glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Your parents and Jake will be there. But so will a lot of people who've missed you. Allison mentioned you weren't invited, but I think that's wrong. Grandma asks about you every time I see her." I sighed, feeling the familiar pull of family obligation warring with my hard-won boundaries. "Trevor, I appreciate the thought, but I can't put myself in that situation again. Not yet." "I understand," he said, nodding. "But I thought you should know things haven't been great for them since you stopped supporting Jake." Despite my best efforts to remain detached, curiosity flickered. "Oh, Jake lost that apartment you were paying for. He moved in with your parents for a while, but apparently that was a disaster. He's working full-time at the golf course now, plus evenings at a bar downtown." Trevor shrugged. "He's not happy about it, but he's actually supporting himself for the first time in years." A complex emotion washed through me. Not satisfaction at their struggle, but a quiet vindication that my financial support had indeed been enabling Jake's dependence rather than helping him grow. "And your parents' investment property?" "The duplex," I couldn't help asking. Trevor grimaced. "They had to sell it. Turns out maintaining a rental property is more work than they expected, especially when they couldn't count on Jake to manage it for free. They didn't make much profit after the sale costs." I nodded, absorbing this information without the glee they might have expected. I took no joy in their difficulties, but I recognized the natural consequences of their choices. "Anyway," Trevor continued, "I just wanted to say that a lot of us understand better now what was going on. Aunt Deborah made sure everyone heard the real story. Some of the family is still loyal to your parents' version, but most of us see things differently." He hesitated, then added, "I should have reached out sooner. I'm sorry." His apology, unexpected and sincere, touched me deeply. "Thank you, Trevor. That means a lot." We chatted for a few more minutes before parting with a tentative hug and promises to get coffee soon. As I watched him walk away, I reflected on how the truth had gradually permeated my family system, changing relationships and perceptions in ways I couldn't have engineered if I'd tried. 3 days later, I was sorting through mail when I found an invitation to a cousin's wedding. My name was written in familiar handwriting, my grandmother's shaky script. Enclosed was a brief note. "We miss you. Ew. Please come. Love, Grandma." I sat with the invitation for a long time, weighing the risks and rewards of re-engaging with the extended family in a setting where my parents and Jake would certainly be present. After discussing it with Dr. Chen, I decided to attend armed with clear boundaries and the support of Allison and Aunt Deborah, who promised to run interference if needed. The wedding was held at a charming vineyard on a perfect June afternoon. I arrived deliberately late to avoid the pre-ceremony mingling, slipping into a seat in the back row just as the music began. Throughout the ceremony, I felt eyes on me from various corners, but I kept my focus on the bride and groom, genuinely happy for their joy. At the reception, I chose a table with cousins I knew to be supportive. Jake ignored me entirely, which was a relief. My mother made one attempt to approach, but Aunt Deborah smoothly intercepted her, steering her toward another group. It was my father who finally cornered me as I returned from the bathroom, his face showing signs of the year's stress in new lines and a certain diminished quality to his posture. "Myrtle," he said, his tone uncharacteristically subdued. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied, maintaining a polite distance. "So do you." An awkward silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of unspoken words and unresolved pain. "Your mother and I have had some time to think," he finally said, staring at his shoes rather than meeting my eyes. "Things haven't been easy since our disagreement." I waited, offering neither assistance nor resistance to whatever he was struggling to say. "I won't pretend to agree with how you've characterized everything," he continued, a hint of the old defensiveness creeping in. "But I can acknowledge that the situation got out of hand. We all made mistakes." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a full admission of wrongdoing. But from my father, it was as close to accountability as I was likely to get. "Yes," I said simply. "We did." Another silence, less tense than the first. "Your grandmother would like to see more of you," he said finally. "And your mother. She misses you in her way." I nodded, neither accepting nor rejecting the implicit invitation to re-establish contact. "I'm glad you're all doing well," I said, meaning it. Despite everything, I should get back to my table. As I walked away, I felt a curious lightness. The encounter hadn't provided the deep reconciliation or full acknowledgement that would have truly healed our relationship, but it had shown me something important. I could face my family without being destroyed by them. I could maintain my boundaries without cruelty or drama. I could hold space for the complexity of loving people who had hurt me deeply without allowing that love to become an avenue for further exploitation. In the months that followed, I established careful, limited contact with my parents' birthday calls. Occasional family gatherings with plenty of buffers. Present brief visits with clear beginnings and endings. Jake remained distant, still resentful of the gravy train's derailment but no longer actively hostile. My relationship with money transformed as well. As my financial situation stabilized, I found joy in thoughtful generosity again, helping a friend with unexpected medical bills, contributing to my receptionist's education fund, supporting causes I believed in. The difference was that these gifts came from free choice rather than manipulation or obligation. I gave because I wanted to, not because I'd been convinced I had to, in order to be worthy of love. Today, 2 years after that late-night phone call that finally broke my compliance, my life bears little resemblance to the exhausted, anxious existence I'd accepted as normal. I've learned that family is defined by mutual respect and care, not by genetic connection or obligation. I've discovered that generosity flows most purely when it's freely chosen, rather than coerced. And I've found that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone who consistently takes advantage is to stop enabling their dependency. My parents faced a reality they couldn't ignore when I finally stood firm. The reality that I was a person deserving of respect, not a resource to be drained. Jake faced the reality that his choices had consequences and that adulthood requires self-sufficiency. And I faced perhaps the most important reality of all, that I had the power to change destructive patterns, even when they were decades in the making. Was it easy? No. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, days I questioned every decision, moments I nearly gave in to the familiar pull of guilt and obligation. The road to recovery, financial, emotional, relational, was longer and harder than I ever imagined. But sitting here now in a life rebuilt on my own terms, I can say with absolute certainty that it was worth it. Worth every uncomfortable conversation, every painful realization, every moment of standing firm when it would have been easier to surrender. If you're listening to this and recognizing your own situation in mine, please know that you aren't alone. Financial exploitation by family members is far more common than most people realize, wrapped in layers of love, obligation, and shared history that make it particularly difficult to identify and address. Know that your resources, your money, your time, your energy belong to you. Sharing them should be a choice made freely, not a requirement for maintaining relationships. True love never demands that you damage yourself to prove your devotion. The journey to reclaiming your power may be difficult, but on the other side lies a life of authentic connections, healthy boundaries, and genuine generosity. One where no is a complete sentence, and yes is a gift freely given, rather than extracted through manipulation. I hope my story helps you find the courage to write your own ending, one where you too can stand in the sunshine, free from the weight of exploitation disguised as love. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of your generosity? What helped you find the strength to stand firm? Please share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of overcoming family challenges and building healthier relationships. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing this journey, share it with them. Thank you for listening. And remember, you deserve relationships that build you up, not drain you dry.